We're lucky enough in our state to have a great partnership with folks like Youth Villages and to get some good guidance around how we can better support these young people, because they come with their own set of unique challenges. So, we're not doing the job that we need to be doing if we don't put some good structure in place on how we want to manage those, the work that we do and the expectations that we have from different contracts with and partnerships, and even all the way down to our frontline staff. So I want to guide y'all a little bit through that. And we really got two objectives this afternoon, and I'm going to take care of the first one. I'm going to let my partner Mike take care of the second one here. But first I want to talk about how we communicate and engage between the three branches of government and how they assist us in informing our policy and practice development for our child welfare clients, because really we are dependent on all of those three branches to help us do that. And just before we get started down that path too far, I want to give you a little bit of context of what we're dealing with here in Tennessee. On any given day, we're serving around 8,000 children in our foster care system, and roughly 3,000 of those are age 14 or older. Then again, in that third bullet, 2,000 of those of the eight are in custody due to delinquency issues. So that kind of gives you some idea of the type of children we're working with. And as mentioned earlier during introductions, we have gone through a federal consent decree called Brine 8 in our state, which we went through back in 1999, and we're still working our way through. So some of that has allowed us and guided some of our work as well, which I would share. Not on the slide, but I think is also important to know, is that we are a state administered system here. So we have our central office here in Nashville, and we have our state divided into 12 geographic regions, and that's how we kind of give support from our office here in Nashville to the field staff that are actually going out and meeting with our children and families day in and day out. So we have 3 single county regions of those 12, which would be Shelby County, Memphis area, Davidson County, and Knox County, which is Knoxville. Then those other 9 are multiple county regions. We have one, for example, it's now 8 counties that surround Davidson County. That's called our Mid-Cumberland region. So there's a mix of some rural and urban areas in those, which can bring their own set of challenges a little bit. But just a little bit of thought into what our population looks like. Okay, just to give you, following the same trend, some things that are occurring in our state around permanency. Roughly 54% of our kids are reunified with children and families. 22% exit to relatives or guardians. Roughly 14% exit to adoption each year. And then we have that population that's most vulnerable, which is the 8% that tend to age out. And then 2, we capture in an other exit, and these are kids that might run away or be on a runaway status at the time they turn age 18 or some other type of outcome. Our aging out data, as Mike mentioned earlier, as you can see, that first line is 2008 to 2009. We had 1,209 children that aged out of foster care that year. And then the bottom line there in 2014-15 fiscal year, 932. But the important piece is the trend is that number decreased every year in that 5-year period. And also in that last column, as you can see, the number of children accepting our extension of foster care services continued to increase during the same period. This is just a closer look at that extension of foster care service data on the number of kids. Again, the point here is each year more kids are accepting the service. Then, of course, this is a reflection on each of our geographic regions across the state and the average number of days that those children are staying engaged with our department through the extension of foster care. And in 2014, the mean rate for those kids was 235 days, and in this year, it's increased to 255 days. We want to see that moving forward because we know, much like our own kids, and young people out in the community, these young people aren't ready for adulthood until later in life. So the best we can do is try to support them until they're ready and try to get them to be contributing members of the community. Snuck in one adoption slide here just to give you some idea of what adoptive permanency looks like in our state. Last year we finalized 1,162 adoption. This year we lowered that mark by about roughly 51 kids, and did 1,111 adoptions. But we still were able to get a fairly significant of our older youth adopted on their, and get them to permanency through that outlet. So here's our first walk down the path of taking a look at what works best for our agency when we talk about policy development. And one thing we've learned, or at least I've learned over the last 7 years I've been in the position is, anytime that I can link an internal department policy to a federal or a state law or another legal mandate like a information memorandum from the Department of Health and Human Services and Administration of Children and Families, anytime I can wrap our internal policy around a law or a mandate or any other evidence-based practice, then we have a better outcome, because that really allows us or gives us the direction we need to know what to do, and then our policy gets to step in how we do it, why we do it, and what are our expectations as far as within our agency, and sharing that with community stakeholders and others. And then lastly, that legal mandate or that statute and that policy also should filter all the way down into the way we design or modify the way we do our work or our practice. But it doesn't always happen this way. I mean, just this last year, we introduced some in-state legislation around the way that we provide full disclosure to our adoptive families. And we've had a practice in place for a long time, and we had a state statute in place that prescribed exactly how we provided full disclosure to families. But we felt like it wasn't exactly what we needed, so we partnered with a legislator to better define exactly and set expectations around full disclosures provided, because we didn't have a policy within our agency on how we did it. We just followed the law. So by updating our law and already having a sound practice, we were able to formulate a policy that allowed us to link these three things together, which, as I shared earlier, really allows us to create a sound practice. But that takes some real collaboration. And some of the efforts in Tennessee that we've had around that are youth engagement, of course. Tennessee Commission, we have a partnership with our Tennessee Commission on Children and Youth and Youth Transitions Advisory Councils. We have a 3 branches institute that I'm going to talk a little bit about here in a second. We have policy work groups, all of our private providers within our state that serve our children in foster care, either through congregate care or therapeutic foster care. Most of them are members of the Tennessee Alliance for Children and Families, so they have their own organization that support one another. We also have our statewide foster parent association, and then lastly we have our administrative office of the courts and local foster care review boards that are often partners and help collaborate with us in policy modification and development. So the 3 Branches Institute, this is representative from each of leadership from each of the executive, legislative, and judicial branches of our government. They were invited by our governor and our commissioner, Jim Henry, about 2 years ago to form a group and take a look at what a common agenda might be for moving forward child welfare in our state, with at that time uniquely focusing some time and energy on how we might realign our juvenile justice system, which we recognized as some real opportunity to improve practice there. We were really, our state has youth development centers where we house, and I would say very loosely house, some of our most some of the delinquent offenders with the most offenses in place, some of the most heinous offenses in place I'm talking about. So they're very similar to a jail, or what I would describe as a detention center. So what we were finding there wasn't real opportunity for supporting those kids, to really teaching them skills to get beyond age 18, for helping them learn and get the education we felt like they needed. So we really felt like it was important to engage all of each of the 3 branches of our own government to help us kind of figure this out and make a commitment to how we might want to move that forward somewhat. So these groups, you think about how wide Tennessee is. Actually, these groups met in each of our grand divisions of our state. So there would be a group that met in Memphis on Tuesday, then another group might meet in Nashville on Thursday, and they would meet in Knoxville on Wednesday of next week. So we were able to engage across the state, each of the representatives from each of the grand divisions of our state. So these were all chaired by juvenile judges, and they met quarterly and focused on, again, the issues in the first bullet there, but they've since taken on some other areas of our work, including assessing our adoption practice, the forms and our process for engaging families to surrender their parental rights, which can be very obstructive, and it's hard to get that through the court system. So they've taken on several different projects in that time that have allowed us to really move our agency forward. I know this is very hard to see, and I wouldn't expect you to be able to read it, but these are just some of the these are some of the representation from each of our grand divisions. Of course, our executive committee was led by our governors, the First Lady, Ms. Chrissy Haslam, our commissioner, Jim Henry, the commissioners from our other state agencies, including John Dreisner, Bill Gibbons, Larry Martin. Then we had legislators, including Representative Joe Armstrong, Representative Harry Brooks, John DeBerry, Kevin Brooks, and then, of course, our judges and justices on the other side, Ms. Holly Kirby, Judge Dan Michael, Judge Robert Lincoln. So we were able to get a good group and really come to some common ground on where we felt like we wanted to move some of our biggest challenges within our agency forward, including, once those were identified, how we might improve our policy and put structure around that work. Because, of course, once you get that skeleton, then you have to put the policy together. And we have a lot, once we've engaged the 3 branches institute, it doesn't stop there. We continue to engage external and internal stakeholders along the way to make sure that we've vetted any practice ideas or changes to practice that are coming forward. So we have policy review committees that include foster parents, that include young people, include our private providers, and reviewing some of that stuff. So we're trying to be very thoughtful in who we engage and seeking out feedback to make sure that we don't have any unintentional consequences to our other partners that are out there. And then lastly, the practice is the easy part. It's what we're able to do. Our department has a practice wheel in place where we spend a lot of time really thinking about teaming and engagement and assessing issues before we start planning and implementing and of course, tracking things to conclusion. So as I mentioned earlier, the way that we found this works best for us is to engage the right people at the table and determine, how we want to create a best practice, implement an evidence-based service, formulate or restructure or modify a law, and then allow that to filter down to our policy and practice and let that shape it for us is the way this seems to work best for us in our state. So that's enough about me and the policy development. Mike's going to come up and talk about how we actually apply some of these things, including the work that we did on prudent parenting.
So many of you probably have heard of the Preventing Sex Trafficking and Strengthening Families Act. This is a new federal law. It has a lot of sex trafficking stuff in it, but it also has a lot of other practice-related issues within child welfare. Prudent parenting and normalcy is a big one. Successor guardians, PPLA for young people 16 and older. Another one that came about in 2008 was fostering connections and adoption success. And then a few other Tennessee laws that internally we've been working on with the legislature with full disclosure and then foster youth driver's license. So we're making sure that foster parents were identified as caregivers just like a parent would or a grandparent would. So breaking down barriers to make sure we address these things. In the implementation of Preventing Sex Trafficking and Strengthening Families Act, what we needed to do, obviously, we get the information from the feds, the law, and they say you have a year to implement this, and so you have to get all the parties together to make sure that you're on track for this. So every state has to get this done in different areas within pretty much by September 2016. So what we needed to do is, look at existing training and work with agencies to support normalcy for youth, engage stakeholders, youth, foster parents, review policy and things from other states. Other states already had some of these policies, California, Utah, Florida, to name just a few. Get all the people together to make sure that we're on the same page. Craft the policy and develop training, gather feedback and refine. And that's kind of where we're at, is developing the training and then rolling that out to foster parents and DCS staff and provider staff. And basically we want to create more, and why this is important is we want to create more normalcy for young people in foster care. You guys have seen all the negative statistics. You know the cost to taxpayers. What needs to change within the child welfare system? Well, we need to make sure that we're providing the support on the front end to make sure they're not coming in. We need to make sure that when they come in, that we're getting them back to permanency with a strengthened family environment, not just strengthening the child, but strengthening the family. And we need to focus on what other young people have that are not in care. So a big thing across the country is we are very needs driven. If there's a need, let's address it. But are we building strengths? Are we providing young people with the normal everyday opportunities that young people in foster care don't have? And we're not. And many states would probably agree with me with that. And there's a multitude of reasons: liability, people are afraid, they want to make sure kids watch 24 hours a day all the time. Well, what about the kid who, just wants to go to his prom, right? Or date, or even spend the night at somebody's house, like the young person not in foster care. Those are things that if we do more of those things, you will see young people potentially making mistakes, but hopefully learning from those at an earlier age and not 23 and 24 and making some bad decisions with that. So here's some things that we want to try to capture with this law. We wanted youth voice around normalcy. And so when I asked the young people what they wanted, I was expecting, well, I want to be able to go to my friend's house. I want to go to the prom. I want to do activities. I want to go on school events. And I want to do those things. That's not what they told me. They said, that's all good. We want to do that stuff. But they want us to teach them healthy relationships instead of keeping them away from relationships. So the system is so don't do anything wrong, and we got to make sure you do everything right, and you can't get in trouble, and we got to watch you all the time. They don't know how to make mistakes. They're not learning those things that are developmentally appropriate. So they hit 22 or 23, guess what they do? They find somebody and they get into a horrible relationship with them because they don't know how to have relationships. So they said, let me learn to have relationships, whether they're good or bad, while we're in the system. They don't want to be a burden or feel like they're a burden. They don't want, introduce me by my name, not the F word and foster kid. I want the freedom of self. I want you to believe in us. And so these are the things that all states should be doing, is engaging young people in what's right in the system at all levels. So frontline staff, directors, all the way up to commissioners, legislators, and I know in many states that you guys are with that, you have young people coming up and talking to you about what needs to be better in the system, and that's what needs to happen. So what happens when you successfully implement some of these things? And I'm going to go into some services first before we get into that stuff, but these are the things that we have in Tennessee that supports our young people. A lot of states don't have as much of this stuff, and I think that can affect some of the outcomes. But our extension of foster care services goes up to age 21 for young people in school, secondary, post-secondary, mental health. We actually don't serve young people through extension like many states do on employment or working towards employment. We want to. And we should be doing it, but the states that are doing it, kudos to them on that. We have our Jim Casey Youth Opportunities Resource Centers in 4 communities across the state. They provide young people with opportunity passport, financial literacy, high-set or GED work, and anything else they might need if they experience some sort of hardship. YV LifeSet, we have some federal funding called PREP, which is our Personal Responsibility Education Program. That we implemented a teen outreach program, which is positive youth development, and Sisters Saving Sisters, which is a pregnancy prevention work with our young ladies in the state. We have independent living wraparound funding, which is funding coming from Chafee, to provide support like car insurance or graduation packages or anything a young person may need to move them in the right direction. We have our educational training vouchers and Bright Future scholarships, which are our scholarships. The educational training voucher all states have. Medicaid to 26 for young people that have aged out, all states should have that. And then we do a lot of referrals to the Workforce Investment Opportunity Act and connect them for employment support. Also, we do a lot of work with, and we're still trying to refine the practice, but credit checks for young people in foster care. And that's a federal mandate as well. And so young people 14 and older, we should be doing credit checks with them regularly and routinely, at least once a year for them if they're in care, to make sure that people aren't fraudulently taking out their credit. And what we found out of 3,200 young people, we have about 30 that had credit taken out by a caregiver or somebody that has their social security number. And so our job is to clear that and make sure that they're on the right track to prepare, because once you hit 18 and you have credit, it's hard to start. There's really nowhere to go. We also have our youth boards, and so we have 3 major boards. We have a lot of other boards, and Youth Villages also has their peer-to-peer boards as well. But we want to make sure youth are involved and engaged in helping us figure out the system, or they have ideas of how to improve the system or how to engage foster parents for young adults. And every year we want to see more young people involved, and we've had close to 400 or 500 young people last year involved in this. Last year we had about 448 young people obtain a high school diploma, GED, or high set. We had approximately another 126 in extension of foster care complete their high school education. So they didn't complete their high school education at 18 for whatever reason. They stayed in our service. They were able to complete that and either decide to go towards employment or college. We had another 21 young people who completed post-secondary education. 14 were not in extension of foster care, and 7 were in extension of foster care. And these are just numbers, right? So obviously what we should be showing you is this out of how many, right? That's the number you want to be looking at for your state. And that's a hard number to get at, and we're still working towards that because of all the young people moving in and how you look at the cohorts. But the idea is to, we know that by 19, 71% of our young people have finished their high school or GED. We did a survey at age 21. Every state does this as well. The National Youth Transition Database, they have this. And so they should be surveying young people at 17, 19, and 21 to understand outcomes within their state. And you can see that finished high school or GED, we're at 71%. I'm hoping to hit 80% by 21. And then we start all over. So we survey a whole nother group of 17-year-olds. We survey those young people at 19 and 21, and we continue, hopefully, with the work we're doing to see improvements in those areas. If we don't, we need to look at what we're doing wrong and restructuring that. So again, looking at our data to understand what we're doing right and doing wrong. And some areas are strong and some areas are weak. Employed full or part-time, 17-year-olds, only 6% who were in custody who took this survey said, I have a job or a part-time job. At 19, 25%. That's horrible. We're not doing a very good job in that area. So what we need to do is try to connect more young people while they're in custody to vocational opportunities, to employment, so they get those experiences. Because if they're starting at 19 or even 3/4 of them after 19, that's not a good thing. So this is how we're using it to try to strengthen some of our employment practices. Can we make a difference? Yes, and every state can. We have to build connections to families, friends, communities. We can rewire the brain. We can make a difference with positive youth development, making sure their needs are addressed through the mental health treatment they may need. Teen years there's an increased opportunity for that. For a long time, a lot of research was saying, you're done at 18, you can't really change anything. The brain is not fully developed until mid-20s. Making sure young people are involved in their lives is really important, and empowering them and teaching them to empower for themselves. Getting the advocacy groups and the legislative branch to improve laws and practices and enhance practice with well-being and permanency. And, John and I don't like young people aging out, and so, what can we do while they're in custody to improve that? So we have permanency roundtables, utilization reviews. What is hindering this case or this young person from going home to their family? What does the family need to be supportive in? Let's make that happen. Some advice from young people. These are the 6 main things young people across the state told me. Get to know me as a person. Show me that you care. Communicate with me. Be professional. Be honest and reliable, and help me be my best. Believe in me. There's a lot of research showing that young people have a pretty high optimism of what's going to happen to them, but their workers or the people working with them don't believe in them. And that has to change. That has to change with everybody, courts and the legislators, and just everybody has to make sure that we can make a difference with these young people. Ongoing challenges, competing priorities, child welfare systems. There's always a new law or something coming into place and you have to get this done, so there's always priorities. John and I are always fighting priorities from other parts of this division, trying to make sure that we're the most important and getting what we need for our young people. Other local kind of challenges, lack of transportation in rural areas, lack of housing near educational institutions, employment supports. These are things that all states are dealing with that we have to try to figure out to make sure that young people can connect to employment and school and things like that. Ongoing focus, develop quality transition plans. Make sure we're planning really well for these young people. Getting youth voice, working earlier, 14 to 16-year-olds, making sure we help develop skills within them. Not just look at permanency. States, we have a great culture of permanency in Tennessee, but permanency gets you home to your family. Is there anything we can do to make sure that we are preparing you for adulthood at the same time? You have to do both of those things. That's what happens when you're at home with your family. They're trying to prepare you for adulthood while you're there. We need to do the same thing. We have a website that obviously is extremely long, so you won't be able to copy those, but we have a website. If you just go to Tennessee DCS, our information is right here, and